It's so nice to finally have walls that are like a blank canvas. They're white, they're painted, they're super nice. So in the last episode, we got a lot of organization done by putting up these shelves, and we put a lot of my tools and materials and supplies up on this wall. That cleared up a lot of space. And all of that space is gonna come in super handy when we, this episode, finally start building something. The workshop is finally cleaned up. Let's start building. Let me show you what I'm thinking. Okay, so let's have a look at our dust collector setup and how we're gonna build it. I've tried to sketch out a rough layout of how this is gonna look. And the way our setup is gonna work is that down here, we have a very nice illustration of a table saw. The table saw generates dust. And that dust will get sucked up into the motor, which has a big steel-bladed fan on it. And that steel-bladed fan is then gonna shove all the dust particles into what is gonna be a dust cyclone, which we're gonna build, and we'll talk about that more later. The dust cyclone's job is to separate the particles from the air. And the way it does that is that it spins it around in circles, and then all the dust particles get pushed out to the wall and then fall into a bag underneath. The clean air that then is in the middle of this contraption will get sucked up and forced into a big filter. And all the really fine particles that make their way all the way through the system and into the filter and get filtered out right there, they will fall into this bag in the bottom here. So then when the whole system is full, all we have to do is take off this bag and replace it with an empty one. And we're gonna build it big enough so that it can support our needs right now and hopefully all our future needs with all the machines that we might buy, like a planer or things that generate a lot of dust. Now that we know roughly how this is gonna work, let's look at the parts that we have to work with. I'll show you a quick summary of how we're gonna build this. We can divide the entire project into two parts. Here, let me show you. Okay, so the first part being the frame and the structure that holds everything, and the second part is all the special pieces inside that we need to fabricate. Now the frame and everything you see right here is built out of 2x4s with sheet goods on the sides and insulation on the inside. That part I can build here, but there's a couple of pieces inside of here that I need to custom build for this project, and one of those parts being the dust cyclone, which is built out of sheet goods and bent and welded together. That part I don't really have the facilities to build here, so I'm gonna build that part at school, and then we'll bring all the parts back here and assemble them, and hopefully everything should fit together. Okay, so these are the parts that we've got to work with. This ginormous thing is half of an old dust extractor. It came with a base that Simon and Lucian now have converted into a work table. And what this used to be was just a massive motor with a fan in it. So this big motor on the backside is directly connected to just a big metal fan that sucks in the air and pushes it out through the side here. And actually, that part of this entire box is the only thing that we'll end up needing. We're gonna cut it off right here and just use the motor housing portion of this frame in our setup. We're also gonna cut off a couple of these rings because they're super convenient, and we're gonna mount them to the bottom side of the filter and the Cyclone to strap our waste bags to. We also bought one of these giant filters, and they are gonna be doing the filtration of the air to take out the very fine particles. There's a paper filter on the inside here, and the surface area is really big, so hopefully we should get a good airflow through the entire system. So we made our way down to the metal workshop, and our plan now is going to be to make that dust cyclone. I've 3D modeled it, and I've got all the parts laid out. The next step now is to take the drawings that I've got there and draw them on 1:1 scale on this piece of paper, cut them out, and then transfer it onto this piece of 1mm galvanized steel. So let me show you how this dust cyclone is going to work. It consists of a cylinder that has a conical bottom to it and an inlet up here. The way this works is that the dust and air gets blown in through there. It then gets spiraled around here, which forces all the debris and stuff out towards the edges. Those then fall down and collect in the bottom here. The air is then sucked out and up through here, and the air that is coming out here should be clean and free of particles. Alright, that's 3 of the 4 templates cut out, and since these now are made out of paper, we can move them around and try to fit them as good as possible to the sheet so that we can utilize most of it. And with any sort of luck, it looks like we'll actually be able to fit all 3 pieces on one sheet. That means that the whole cyclone will only take 2 sheets. That was all the cutting. So now that all the pieces are cut out, the next step will be to shape these pieces into what is going to become the cyclone for the dust collector. So I think we'll just get to it. All right, we're over by the bender now. So we'll just put this in, line this up to the mark. There we go, and then it should bend. And there we have it. That's the first bend. Haha! That worked out way better than I expected. Next up, rollers. The way this tool works is that it rolls it in between these 3 metal rollers. We're gonna start out by practicing on this piece, which is gonna be the inner tube. Okay, and now hopefully, ta-da! It's rolling. So we're doing this until it's round. that's all the pieces done. That cone was a lot more difficult than the normal cylinders. I don't really know how you're supposed to do this. Maybe one of you knows. Anyways, next step is gonna be to tack weld these together so that they can maintain their shape and not be all floppy. Right now, the edges don't meet perfectly, but I think I can force them into place and then weld it together. So one note before we get started. This is galvanized steel. What that means is that there's a protective coating on the outside that makes it rust resistant. That coating, when it gets warm from the welding, will release toxic fumes. So it's really important that if you're gonna weld this, be sure to wear a mask. So let's get started welding. It took a little bit of convincing, but the two parts are finally welded together. The next step now will be to weld on the inlet, which hopefully should fit in like this for the air and the dust to go in here. And then once we get this part welded in, the last part will be the spiral, which is gonna go in here, and the spiral is gonna go from the top of the inlet and then circle around all the way to the bottom here so that the air moves around and spins and comes out underneath here. And then at the very end, this tube is gonna go in through the middle. All right, so next up, welding on the inlet and the spiral. So we're back in the workshop, all the metalworking is finished, and this guy is done. I've sprayed a rust preventing spray on all the welded seams. I've also gone over and glued up all the seams. What's left to do on this one is cut out the lid in wood that is gonna hold this inner tube inside of here. Up next, we're gonna build a frame, and for that, we first need to cut a whole bunch of 2x4 pieces. The frame behind me is basically done, most of the structure is in place. The next step will be to start mounting the components inside of the frame. But that will be all for this episode. We got a lot done, but there's still a lot left to do. Make sure you subscribe for the next episode where we're gonna make a bunch more custom parts and mount everything inside of the frame, as well as insulating and covering up the entire box. And not to mention a challenge of trying to move this entire thing out of the workshop and get it installed on the parking lot outside. Again, thank you so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!